What is the supernatural view of happiness? Hi, I'm Mike Mason. This is the St. Joe Society podcast. The St. Joe Society is a Catholic lay apostolate devoted to help men order all things to Christ by growing strong in mind, body, and spirit. If you'd like to learn more about our work, you can check us out online at stjosephsociety.org. This is the Intro to Moral Theology, episode 12. And all right, fellas, we have arrived at the last episode of this unit. So as you guys recall, in the first unit, we covered just introductory topics of moral theology. In the second unit, we talked about what man is, because you can't perfect a thing unless you have a clear understanding of what it is. So we spent some time on that last month. And then this month, we've been working on the second most fundamental question to perfect a thing is, what is man's life for? Now, this month, in episode 9, we talked about a natural approach to happiness. So we talked about the fact that what happiness is when you have some sort of end or goal that you discern as good. And then when you acquire that end or goal, that gives you a level of satisfaction. And that's what happiness is called. We talked about the fact that happiness is the point of life, that everything we do serves happiness. So happiness never serves something else. Everything else serves it. Okay. We also discussed that, pretty much everybody agrees with that. The controversial part is what we got started into in weeks 10 and 11. In those weeks, we looked at what is the object of happiness. So what is that end, that one object that if you acquire it will make you perfectly happy? And we looked at things that are below men, like wealth and honors and status and power and stuff like that. And we showed that those can't work, because those imperfect, finite goods can't make us perfectly happy, which is what we want. Then we looked at some non-Christian approaches to happiness, like hedonism and utilitarianism. We looked at stoicism and evolutionism last week. And we also found that each one of those is deficient in their understanding of what the happy life is and what they propose to be the object of true happiness. This week, we're going to turn our attention to the answer, okay? Not just the answer that's true for me or true for you, but is true for all people. We are going to discuss supernatural happiness, which is the end of goal of every person's life, because every person is made to be in union with God and happy with him for all eternity. Now, whether they get there or not, it's a different question, but they are made for it, okay? As I said in episode 9, natural happiness, there is an element of natural happiness that's imperfect, okay? So it's the kind of happiness a person left to their own powers could have in this life, okay? We may call it like just a decent human life. But that life is always going to be imperfect and incomplete, because a person who only stays on that natural path will always miss the true end or goal they were made for, and that's union with God. We're going to talk about that union today. And the fancy theological term for what we're going to talk about today is the beatific vision. Now, beatific vision is just what it sounds like. It's a vision, which I'll describe here in a minute what I mean by a vision, but it's a vision that makes you beatified or happy. Okay. So what the beatific vision is it's when a person sees God and it makes them perfectly happy. Okay. So we're going to unpack that today. And this is one of the sweetest topics we can talk about. It's a theme that we'll definitely return to in the future, and maybe even develop into a larger unit to do. But let's go ahead and launch in, because it's cool stuff. All right. What is the meaning of life? Okay. What perfects human beings? What's really good for them? Okay. As we said, we are perfect and fulfilled when we are happy. Now, in saying that human goodness lies in happiness, what we don't mean, okay, is that human fulfillment comes from doing whatever we happen to feel like at any particular moment. So it's not this relative view. Okay. So when I say human beings for happiness, I don't mean it's like relative. It's different for everyone. Just do whatever you feel like doing. Okay. Happiness is not, the proper understanding of it is not a matter of doing whatever it is that turns you on. So for some people, they're happy making money. For some people, they're happy chasing political power. Some people are happy trying to hit 40 home runs and steal 40 bases. It's all different strokes for different folks. That's not the position we've been advocating for. In the Christian tradition, in the tradition I'm teaching you guys, happiness is something to be understood while bearing in mind that a human life has a goal. Christian thinkers like Jesus, Augustine, Thomas Aquinas have always held that this is nothing short than God himself. Okay. So guys, remember how we defined happiness. It's when you have an end that you perceive as a good for you. You're happy when you acquire it. All the goods in this world are finite and imperfect. And so the relevant amount of happiness they can give you is finite and imperfect happiness. Okay. The effect can't be greater than the cause. What Christianity says is that men are created to be happy, but the object, that perfect, infinite, unchanging object that will make us perfectly happy, that perfectly good and beautiful and true object is God himself. So a person is not truly happy until they have God, which doesn't happen to the next life. Now, one thing that follows from this before we launch into some details, what does this mean? A person cannot achieve their end in this life. Can't. Not even Christians. We cannot. The goal is not this life. It's the next one. Okay. And everything we do in this life needs to be ordered to that end. This is a theme we're going to come back to over and over and over and over. Guys, we have to live for the next world. Now, when I say we live for the next world, it doesn't mean this world's irrelevant. Okay. No, it puts this world in its proper context. So everything you're doing on this side of the grave is in a preparation for the other side. And what's on the other side of the grave is what gives everything on this side meaning. Okay. No, remember we talked in the past about how sanctifying our whole life to Christ and touching base through prayer throughout the day and our rule of life. We spread prayers out, and we talked about how to sanctify the moments in between. One of the ways you do that is by recognizing that every single thing you do is ordered towards union with God in heaven. And that's why our mission statement here is to help men to order all things to Christ. Why? Because everything is an opportunity to become holy. Okay, that's the idea. All right, let's look at some of the data behind this stuff. Let's look at first our capacity for God. So out of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, it says this: the desire for God is written on the human heart because man is created by God and for God. God never ceases to draw man to himself. Notice in there the exitus and reditus, right? We were created by God in order to return to him. God created us with this vacuum in our soul that God himself wants to fill. Okay, listen to Jesus in John 10:10. Jesus says, I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. The full life he's talking about is the spiritual life. Okay, imperfectly in this life, so we can have union with God in this life, though it's imperfect and incomplete. It'll become complete and perfect in the next life. Famous quote from St. Augustine: our hearts are restless until they find their rest in God. St. Augustine in this passage says that the philosophers of the past were always trying to find that one object that would make them happy, okay? And they could never find it. They were searching in vain because the pagan philosophers, the noble pagans, for all their merits, and Plato and Aristotle and them have lots of merits. I love those guys. They did not have divine revelation. They did not have a concept of sin and then the solution to sin, which is grace and Jesus Christ and all the things we do. What Augustine points out, and what we learn from the scriptures, is that, guys, our hearts, we are a restless creature. Why are people frantically trying to find happiness? Because God created a space in our hearts that only he can fill. And when we try to fill that space with anything else, it just doesn't work. Okay. And so that's what Augustine's getting at. That's what Jesus is getting at in the Catechism. Listen to St. Thomas Aquinas. And this quote's a little bit longer, but it summarizes everything we've been talking about. And this is a real good barometer where you guys can be like, how much have I learned over the last month? Well, as you track through this, you'll kind of see as it jumps off the page how much you've learned. Check this out. Since everything desires its own perfection, a man desires for his ultimate end that which he desires as his perfect and crowning good. So notice everyone desires their perfection. Everything's teleology. Remember teleology. Remember, everything's ordered towards its own perfection and flourishing. And so the ultimate thing we're after is the most perfect and crowning good. Now, Aquinas says man's end or goal is twofold. You guys should already be anticipating what he's going to say. In the first sense, man's last end is the uncreated good, namely God, who alone by his infinite goodness can perfectly satisfy man's will. So notice the object that our intellects and wills are after is God, the uncreated good, the infinite good. But in a second way, man's last end is something created, existing in him. And this is nothing else than the attainment or enjoyment of the last end. Now, the last end is called happiness. If therefore we consider man's happiness in its cause or object, then it's something uncreated, namely God. But if we consider it as the very essence of happiness, it's something created. Notice here, guys, in episode 9, what did we say? This is what happiness is. It's subjective, it's inside of you, and it's the goal of life. Thomas agrees with that. Then we said, what objects does the world offer you for happiness? That was episodes 10 and 11. We said no object in this side of life can work. There's only one object that can work, and that's God. There's Thomas Aquinas. Fellas, this is exciting stuff because after these 4 episodes, you should have a very clear understanding of what the point of life is. It's to be happy, and you can only be happy if you're with God. Okay? Now, the beatific vision, what this is, in order to perfect a thing, you have to perfect a thing according to what it is. Well, what is the thing that makes us unique? It's our intellects, right? So our intellects is what sets us apart from the animals. So when we did the hierarchy of being a few weeks ago, remember we talked about that plants and animals have power. We have powers they have, but we transcend them. How are we higher than them? Our intellects. So you perfect a thing according to what sets it apart from other things, all right? And this is true for horses, dogs, whatever. Because our intellects are what make us unique and what make us most perfect, what's going to happen in heaven is God is going to reveal himself to our intellects directly. Okay, the scriptures talk about we're going to see God face to face. Now, the seeing's not an eyeball seeing for obvious reasons. God doesn't have a body. Jesus does, of course, but God doesn't, right? God's going to reveal himself to our intellect. So the seeing here is an intellectual insight. When this happens, our intellects are going to be completely absorbed in God, and it's going to overflow through all of our being. So our will and our appetites and our bodies, everything is going to be elevated, perfected through it. And that's why the vision of God in heaven is called a vision, because we see it, and it's called beatific vision. Beatific because the vision makes you perfectly happy. That's the idea. Okay? Super cool stuff, profound stuff. Now, there's a lot I could elaborate on this, but I just want to read a couple passages from Reginald Garrigou-Lagrange's thoughts on the beatific vision from his book Life After Lasting, and then we'll stop there. But he just has such beautiful language, and I just can't outdo it, so I'll read what he says. Quote number 1, the saints in heaven, seeing God face to face, love him above all things, because they see with the most perfect evidence that God is better than all creatures combined. This love will never pass away. Love of God in heaven is nothing but the perfect act of charity, whereby the soul, without cessation, loves God more than itself and enters into a state of uninterrupted ecstasy. Notice this, guys. When we get to heaven, we're going to see the fact that God's the infinite good. And as good as this life is, everything down here is finite and nothing can match him. Second, in the fatherland, we shall see infinite goodness as he is in himself. We cannot find in him the least aspect which can displease, nothing to drive us away. Our eternal act of love will never suffer the least shadow of weariness. Infinite goodness fills so perfectly our capacity of love that it attracts us irresistibly more than any ecstasy that can be had on earth. Wow. Now, a lot of questions come up when I teach this. Guys will say, well, what about my loved ones, right? Okay, I see God make me perfectly happy. Are my loved ones irrelevant? No. Okay, check this out. Garrigou-Lagrange again. Not only will the saints love God above all, but seeing one another in God, the saints love one another. The degree of this love is measured by nearness to God. Each rejoices at the degree of beatitude which others have received, yet each loves with special affection those to whom he has been united on earth. Holy cow. So when you see God face to face, okay, you're not only going to see him in himself, you're going to see other people's beatitude in him. And so with special affection, if your wife and children and family members are there with you in heaven, you're going to share in their joy because you'll see that clearly as well. Incredible. Okay. Super cool stuff and worthy of return to in the future, which we will. But I want to leave you guys with a practical takeaway as we're wrapping things up here. What do we need to do? Okay. In light of all this sort of stuff, what should we be doing on this side of heaven? Okay. All this cool stuff about God, the beatific vision, being with loved ones. What should we do? There's 3 moments that stand out that I want to draw your attention to, and we'll close here. First moment, baptism. You guys see how important baptism now? Baptism is the doorway into this vision. Second, if you lose your salvation through mortal sin, notice how important reconciliation is, because it puts you back on the path for the beatific vision. And then the third moment of your life that you need to have hyper focus on is that happy death, or what's called final perseverance. Gentlemen, we need to be praying daily, meditating daily on the importance of dying a happy death. And what I mean by happy death is in the state of grace. One of the easiest ways to do this is to devote yourself to the rosary. Every single Hail Mary, you ask the Blessed Mother to help you with final perseverance. Think about Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners when? Now and at the hour of our death. Guys, pray your rosary diligently, because every Hail Mary you pray, you're asking that the Blessed Mother would request the graces you need to die in a state of grace and enjoy the beatific vision for all eternity. All right, we're a little bit over time, but that was just way too cool to stop at the 15-minute mark. Guys, meditate on these awesome truths. We will definitely come back to this more in the future and elaborate on it, because it's just really fun talking about the beatific vision. But I hope you guys had a blessed, have a blessed week. It's been a really fun month talking about the end of man. Next week, we're going to start talking about what decisions can we make to bring about this great future God has in store for us. God bless.